Good morning. My name is Rabbi Chaim Dov Beliak. I'm the volunteer executive director of Friends of Jewish Renewal in Poland. And it's my pleasure this morning to welcome you to a joint program that is conducted by Beit Polska, the progressive movement in Poland, and Friends of Jewish Renewal in Poland. We're very privileged to have a scholar from the University of Warsaw, who I will shortly introduce. I want to help orient everyone to our technical difficulties or challenges, and that is that at the bottom of your screen, you will see a button that says interpretation, and you should choose the language that you want to hear. Professor Ronen will be speaking in English, but she will be simultaneously interpreted by Marek Józowski and then Marzena Szymanska into Polish. So that will allow you to hear the lecture in the language that you're most comfortable with. And I just want to welcome everyone from the various places that are joining us, and remark that this is the 32nd program in our series, and I'll be announcing at the end 2 upcoming programs for February and March. So now let us turn to Professor Ronen, who I consider to be a great discovery. She teaches at the University of Warsaw in the Hebrew Studies Department, and was the head of the department from 2009 to 2021. She is the author of a wide variety of books, and I will not share all of them with you, but I want to focus on the book that will be part of her presentation today, that came out in 2015, A Prophet of Consolation on the Threshold of Destruction, Yoshua Ozjasz Thon, An Intellectual Portrait. This is a very significant figure, as Professor Ronen will share with us. And she's written a number of other books in the area of Hebrew literature and philosophy. And I want to just turn to the fact that her interests are very wide. Recently, I read a review of hers that was just excellent, that she's probably forgotten about a novel called Poland, a Green Land, by Aharon Appelfeld. So it is a pleasure to welcome such a Renaissance professor, and we're appreciative of her participation today. And the floor is yours, Professor Ronen.
Thank you so much for this presentation. To benevolence, I would say that if we talk about Renaissance person, so my hero, Ozjasz Thon, is the Renaissance person today, this evening. And also I would like to thank you for the invitation, and also to say that for me it's very, it's an honor and also a pleasure, because even though I consider myself as a cultural Jew, I'm very much close to the progressive movement on earth, and I would even say that I had a very stormy debate here in Poland on Gazeta Wyborcza about what should be how Judaism should look like in Poland. Very hot, I would say, debate. And then I thought that it's impossible for Polish Jews to accept progressive reform Judaism, let's say that reform and progressive are more or less synonym. I know not exactly, but more or less. And now when I see that progressive Judaism exists in Poland, it's really makes me very happy. In any way, the common view of Polish Jews is that progressive Judaism was not present, because the image of Polish Jewry is like all student. It means very traditional, tend to Hasidism mostly, maybe also kind of Orthodoxy, and in that and it's not the whole truth. I mean, most of let's say the religious Jews in Poland were very traditional, but there was a great presence of progressive Judaism, especially in Krakow and in Warsaw. If I can mention a few names, like Isaac Zilkow, who translated the Hebrew Bible into Polish, and I use this translation because I think that in Polish is the best translation for Jewish studies, but also Markus Jastów from Krakow, Simon Donkiewicz, Isaac Krimstaks, and also others. And it was, of course, a result of influence that came from Germany. So the very close relation between Jews in Poland and in Germany. And also I would like to add that in those days, I mean, the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, mostly the progressive Jewish groups were part of what is called intelligentsia. In any way, I will start first with some biographic notes on Ozjasz Thon, because he is not very well known, and then I will discuss his, I would say, concerns or his perception of Judaism and Jews in Poland, mostly in the time between the two world wars. And also, before, I would like to stress that everything I will tell about him, we must have in mind that he wrote all of this before the Holocaust. It's very important. The Holocaust is not a part of his awareness. It's not something that he even thought it's possible to occur. And well, he died in 1936. So, but this is a thing that was not existed even in his worst nightmares. So we have to have it in mind, because our perception after the Holocaust is completely different. And then we might think that some of his words are a bit, let's say, naive. So he was a really central and important personality in modern Jewish history in Poland. Since the turn of the 20th century, he was an important figure for Krakow Jewry as a rabbi, a preacher, an educator. He was also a philosopher, sociologist, a man of letters, a thinker, and a social leader. In interwar Poland, he was an essential and significant person for the whole Jewish population as an intellectual, a publicist, a politician, a deputy to the Polish Sejm, and a Zionist, theoretician, and activist. During his life and after his death, he was well known and was perceived as a central actor in the religious, intellectual, social, and political life of the Jews in Poland. However, after World War II, he was forgotten. No, that's why I wrote the book about him, because I believe that this fascinating thinker should be rescued from oblivion. And Thon was born in Lemberg, today Lviv, in Polish Lvów, on February 13, 1870. At that time, the city was a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the capital of Galicia. It's important because the Austro-Hungarian Empire is known today for its, let's say, multi-culti atmosphere, kind of tolerance that in other places like the post-Russian parts of Poland was not really known. I mean, so he also inherited a kind of pluralist point of view and tolerance to others. He was born to a very poor Orthodox family. His father, Moshe, was a rich traditional Jew, and he wanted his son to become an Orthodox rabbi. Thon had to conceal from his father that he studied much more than Talmud. At home, he hid the secular books which he borrowed from friends, because if his father found them, he would have turned them up. And when I say poor, it means cold, hunger, I think kind of poverty that we are not aware today. The books he had to borrow from friends, he could not offer to buy even one. He studied in Cheder till the age of 10. He was such a brilliant pupil that when Melamed could not teach him anything more, he left the Cheder and continued studying under the supervision of Rabbi Uri Ze'ev Wolf Salat, one of the most famous Jewish scholars in Lviv. Salat was the one to give Thon the first ordination as a rabbi when he was 16. It had a private character, but Thon always appreciated it much more than his formal ordination in Berlin. He studied the humanities and the sciences in the spirit of the Haskalah in Jewish Enlightenment in Galicia, in Mikra Kodesh school. And in 1988, Thon and a couple of friends founded this association Zion. And from then until his death, he was a devoted Zionist activist. In 1891, he graduated from the German Gymnasium in Lviv and moved to Berlin, where he began studying philosophy and sociology at the university. And he finished his doctorate dedicated to Kant's philosophy in 1895. During his stay in Berlin, he also studied at the Higher Institute for Jewish Sciences, Hochschule für die Wissenschaft des Judentums, and was ordained as a Reform rabbi in 1897. It was remarkable that Thon, who was born to a very traditional family, found the way to progressive Judaism, what is not easy still in today's Poland. In 1897, he removed to Krakow after he was offered to become a preacher at the Progressive Temple Synagogue. After 2 years, he was promoted to the position of rabbi of the synagogue and held this position until his death in 1936. In addition to his rabbinical activity, he also played a significant role in Zionist organizations, initiated many educational and social activities, and supported Jewish and Hebrew education. For example, he was one of the inspiration or initiators of the Tarbut chain of schools in Poland between the wars and was his first president. Thon was an original writer of literary essays, mainly in Hebrew, philosophical essays and ideological articles in Hebrew and German, and sermon in Polish. He was also a publicist who published passionate articles in the Jewish press in Hebrew, Yiddish, Polish, and German. He was one of the founders of the Jewish newspapers in Polish language, Nowy Dziennik. His popular and journalistic writing had the greatest impact since it reached a broad Jewish audience, what we cannot say about his, for example, Hebrew articles and books. His most demanding position was as a representative in the Polish parliament, same for 4 terms, 1919, 1922, 1928, and 1930. He was elected to the first legislature, same, as the member of the General Zionist Party. In his first and third terms, he was the president of the Jewish Circle, a parliamentary club of Jewish same members. In his 4 terms in the Polish parliament, he adopted a pragmatic and conciliatory political style inspired the last period of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In his policy, he sought to reach an agreement with the Polish government on reducing official anti-Semitism and recognizing the civil and national rights of Polish Jews. So after this short presentation of this really impressive personage, I would like to move now to what could be his religious message, which is not only religious, and we will see that. So he was a great orator, an extraordinary preacher. These qualities made him a valued speaker, both as a preacher to the synagogue, as a rabbi in many social and cultural activities, and as a politician. Surprisingly, after his death, it turned out that he wrote down all his homilies, but the texts we have are only the outlines of the great performances in the synagogue. Thon was a spontaneous speaker who talked to the audience looking straight in the eyes while inventing his powerful, full of pathos speeches and sermons. The oral words during the services were born in the time of their delivery. They were verbal improvisations. And I had the luck to meet Professor Markiewicz from Jagiellonian University a few years before his death. And he told me about, he was present when Thon had his ceremonies at the synagogue. So exactly what I just described, his way of talking. He told me about his pathetic and very, very powerful ceremonies. And then I felt that I touched in history when I heard this testimony. Thon's homilies are in the frame of the new pattern of Jewish sermons that was created by Reform Judaism in Germany and was adopted by Progressive Judaism in Poland. His homilies were not like the traditional drasha. They were delivered in Polish, very important, were part of the service and express ideas suitable for their time. Moreover, his philosophical training was rather present in his sermons, as well as his love for Hebrew, Polish, and German literature. Most of the homilies were delivered on holidays and had similar pattern. In almost all of them, he started with biblical event and then turned to the contemporary era. The biblical event, for example, Exodus, was an allegory for the present situation of the Jews. He believed that he and his congregation could learn from the past and find their encouragement for the present. Although the history of the Jews was full of distress and afflictions, the conclusion should be optimistic because the Jewish people always overcame the troubles and survived. In some of the sermons, Thon criticized the current situation of the Jews for the indifference towards their tradition, abandonment of it, and a lack of social solidarity and unity. However, he always saw in the traditional sources, in the text of the Bible, a foundation for consolation and inspiration. What kind of religious message did Thon deliver? The spirit of many of his homilies is full of joy of life, energy, and optimism. The homilies are saturated with encouragement and dignity. Thon tried to move his flock to feel self-respect and unique. He told them that they belong to a magnificent nation which had a distinctive and wonderful history. Thon aimed to make them feel confident for being Jews and to believe that a wonderful future was waiting for them. The intention was to offer them affirmation in contrast to their complex everyday life as Jews among Gentiles in Krakow at the turn of the 20th century. The Jews, Thon declared, were a vivacious and courageous nation of warriors who had eternal ideas. He preached that they remember their past with love and attention and use it to build great power in the future. And it's, quote, "A day it will come in which there will be no more dark nights," end of quote. Thon used powerful words of pathos in order to express a vision on consolation and deep hope. So this is the first motive in his religious message, optimism, and not to forget the past, which is glorious. Thon asserted that in its origin, Judaism was a religion of uplift, which saw in the earthly world the whole and entire existence. There was no world to come or afterlife. A person had eternity or afterlife in his offspring, and not in any kind of existence after death. The biblical theory of creation valued everything that was created as good. The voices of the negation of life in Judaism started to be heard in the time of Ecclesiastes and was much intensified after the destruction of the temple. During long years of living in the diaspora, Jews lost the art of affirming life and the world. Here I would say also some kind of nuance from Nietzsche in this way of thinking about Judaism, biblical Judaism. Also in the Talmud, an affirmation of life cannot be found, nor any other vital forces. This is Thon's idea, not mine. Only with late Kabbalah and early Hasidism did the Jewish frame of mind begin to change and return to its origins. And the highest peak of the art of affirming life reappeared among Jews with Zionism. Not only did Jews begin again understand themselves, like in the ancient era, as a collective and not only as individuals, but also the affirmation of life was directed toward the earthly world. In this sense, at the Thon, Zionism was the return to Judaism in the full sense of the word. This comprehension of Zionism intriguing, particularly that Zionism is considered to be a secular ideology. Zionism was a vital force which brought Jews back to an active role in the world and history. Zionism was a new religious form, a new Messianic style, which led to salvation. And he was really a zealous Zionist. And when he says Zionism, he means Zionism. So if I will say in my words, the word Messianism, it means Zionism in Thon's mind. Thon did not hesitate to name the Jewish nation the chosen people of religion. This small nation at the eastern end of the Mediterranean created eternal poetry and deep thought, a nation that looked like a nation of warriors, but wrote on tablet of stone an impressive law, a nation of shepherds that taught humanity to the knowledge of one God, and with it revealed the profundity of true and great religion. The uniqueness of the Jews was expressed by the idea that they were chosen religiously, it means from the religion point of view, because they created and bestowed the world with the concept of a transcendent God. The historical facts were not important for Thon, but his goal was to encourage his flock and make them proud of their Jewishness. And this is very important. Another motive in his religious message: be proud of who you are. And when I said that the historical facts are not so important for him, because nowadays we know that the Jews were not the first to hold some kind of monotheistic ideas, but strict monotheism for Thon was very important. Thon added that the existence of the people of Israel was the proof of being the nation of the chosen, like the fire that purifies and refines metals, so afflictions and persecution purified the Jews. Those who renounced their belonging to the Jewish people were cowards and the weak who could not bear the suffering. However, those who suffered and continued to be a part of the Jewish people were the chosen, the courageous, and the powerful. The subtext of this homily is that Thon told his congregation that the fact that they came to the service in the synagogue showed that they were brave and powerful. They had chosen to belong to the Jewish people and had not abandoned their group. This fact makes them to be chosen human beings and therefore unique. In such words, Thon tried to shape them into a solid community. In other homilies, he made use of the feelings of belonging and social ties to encourage his flock to solidarity with other social groups among the Jews. He promoted the idea of a social aid for the working class and the poor. So as we see, solidarity is also a very important motive in his message. Nevertheless, Thon was aware to the fact that the temple community was a community of assimilators who went through a deep process of acculturation. Therefore, he wanted to strengthen their ties to the Jewish tradition. They had to remember, he preached, their past and not to relinquish the treasure of their heritage, to be proud of it, to hold their heads high, to respect their Jewishness. He urged them to learn their history, their ancestral language, and their faith. The past was important for not only their morale in times of distress, but also the construction of hope for the future. Thon wanted to intensify the bond of his community with Jewish tradition because it was an never-ending source for glory and nobility. The means to achieve this goal was to underline the importance of Jewish education for the youngsters, and about education I will talk in a moment. Once trying to summarize the main ideas of Judaism, Thon noted the following postulates: strict and pure monotheism, Messianism, which taught the faith in the ethical development of a person until he could reach even a divine completeness of absolute pacifism. This is a kind of version of the internal peace of Kant. And optimism, the belief that life is the mission of human beings which they have to fulfill. So he wanted his congregation to feel that they are really unique and they have to be proud of themselves and their tradition. One of the highest ideals which Thon continually emphasized in his homilies was freedom. First and foremost, he praised national freedom, the desire for an independent, sovereign, national ethnic existence. The two best occasions for preaching such ideas were Pesach and Hanukkah. What the Jews needed first, asserted Thon, was a freedom of the spirit. Spiritual freedom was the necessary step to gaining national freedom. Furthermore, national freedom and national dignity were not in contrast to the will to be a part of humanity in general. Interconnection and unification of humanity was possible only when people were gathered in nations or societies, not as individuals. Freedom is the first and the highest ideal of every society and every human being. And apart from freedom as a national freedom or collective freedom, he also was adherent or underlined the idea of freedom of thought, which I think is really essential. Free thought was not a threat to religion. That's Thon. The highest kind of free thought was the place where also true and deep religiosity were, and there both lived in harmony. The revelation of God in our souls was possible only when there was a total freedom of the mind. Clearly, Thon saw no contradiction between religion and thought, between rationality and faith. In a sermon delivered on Pesach, Thon elaborated on the concept of freedom. He described three kinds of freedom: social, which was the right to self-determination of individuals and nations; spiritual, which was the right for the flexibility of mind and thought without any prejudices and fixed frames of mind; and moral, which in Thon's perception was the right for self-realization. From this analysis, it was evident that for Thon, freedom was a spiritual category. Alas, Jews in his days did not have spiritual freedom because their way of thinking was captivated in superstitions and prejudice. As long as cognition and knowledge were perceived as a sin, Jews would not have the freedom of the mind, Thon said. In fact, the Jews would have freedom only when they left the narrow world of halakha and tradition. Jews had to free themselves from the spiritual ghetto in which they were captured and become modern. They should adopt the Enlightenment's categories of freedom of thought, abandon the ready-made frames of thinking which had lasted for centuries. These words were not only a criticism of Jewish orthodoxy, but also the habit of being passive in the sphere of social and political life. Thon, in contrast to traditional Jewry, did not reject European culture. If he had lived in the Hellenic era, he would have been a Hellenistic Jew. In fact, more than a disdained acculturation, he criticized the cultural level of Jewish people. He felt at home in Europe, and European culture was his as well. His criticism was directed to superficiality of the Jewish encounter with Europe, and not to the encounter itself. He wished to modernize Judaism with principles like reason, science, freedom of thought, and openness to other cultures. Nevertheless, forgetting their glorious past, the Jews would not be able to overcome the gloomy present in which contempt towards the Jews was so widespread. So we see in his thought a very interesting mixture of modern present with the past. I would say that in a way, he tried to find between them both at the golden middle. Thon was aware of the fact that his flock was much closer to the German reforms than to the Eastern Maskilim, let alone orthodoxy. Therefore, he developed in his sermons a concept of Judaism that will be golden middle. After all, he knew perfectly well both worlds, the Orthodoxy world of Lviv and the Reform world of Berlin. Thus, his synthesis of Judaism and modernity was not revolutionary, but evolutionary. For Thon, religion was an organic body, and for that reason it grew, altered, and corrected itself by its inner laws. The mistake of the reforms were of the kind of wanting to break the barrel while trying to keep the wine, specifically rejecting the Hebrew language, thinking that it would not harm the religion, or giving up the practical precepts and keeping the abstract ideas of religion. Thon argued we need different progress. The decisive element for us is to conserve and maintain the whole. This progress can go only as far as our historical specificity and our different will be kept. Crossing this border will not be progress anymore. Well, so it's the kind of progress that holds tradition. However, he also rejected orthodoxy. Jewish orthodoxy was a new form, a reaction to Reform Judaism. And if I quote him, he says, our ancestor could not imagine, he ironized Thon, who knew that Orthodox claim of being the only original and authentic form Judaism. Orthodoxy only had the aspiration of keeping the old form and rejecting any new one. Thon was also convinced that traditional Judaism as it emerged both in the rabbinate of Western Europe and in Hasidism of his time was fossilized. Judaism, the corpus of canonical books, religious thought, ethics, and learning, these were the spiritual possessions the Thon ancestors bequeathed to him and all other Jews thousands of years ago. And what should they do with it? The Jews should keep this treasure, but not as an unchangeable relic. On the contrary, he emphasized that the Jews should enlarge this possession and add to it new treasures. Judaism, as it had developed in 2,000 years of existence in the diaspora, was completely indifferent or completely different than the Judaism of the Second Temple. Judaism was a living organism. It was a vital force which was in constant change and adaptation. Thon, the sociologist, saw religion as a cultural phenomenon revealed by numerous spiritual and creative products, inventions and works of art, literature and philosophy. The Jews created and acquired with their encounter with the other cultures. I think that this comprehensions of Judaism has many similarities with the concept of Judaism as a civilization, which was developed by Thon's younger contemporary Mordechai Kaplan, although his philosophy was the fruit of American Judaism and not Polish. So Judaism always, from the first appearance, adopted itself as something to the dominant culture and always tend to build some new synthesis between Judaism and other cultures. So it's, I may say even this is the nature of Judaism. For Thon, Judaism was not merely a religion, but was a whole civilization, which was in constant evolution. Therefore, Judaism was, on the one hand, a huge ark of cultural treasures, and on the other hand, it was a constant creative force which was flexible enough to adjust itself to different historical and cultural conditions. So what could be this synthesis, the third way? Thon, the son of Wolff's Orthodox Judaism and disciple of Berlin's Reform Judaism, rejected them both. Although he also respected some aspects in these two ways, he also rejected the traditional pre-modern Eastern European Jewish life of the shtetl, what he called Judaism inside the walls of the metaphoric ghetto of the Jewish law. Thus, what was Thon's path to Judaism? Thon offered a third way, or golden mean, between the excessive reformation of the Jewish religion and the ultra-conservative fortification of orthodoxy. The golden mean for Thon was a kind of progress which did not give up the connection to the past. The modernization of the Jew, who was not afraid of religious, cultural, and social changes and innovations, but who also did not stop being a Jew in his emotional and spiritual tie to the Jewish people. In his warm attitude to traditional beliefs and his even pride, let us say, even pride, esteem and pride in Jewish civilization. So now I come to education, the most important tool to realize this vision concerning Judaism was education. One of the topics in his sermons, frequently repeated, was the need to deepen Jewish education. This was the means for creating among the children of his flock engagement and involvement in Jewish life. The only hope for the future would be a young generation which had a Jewish consciousness. Thon was convinced that the current Jewish education was too practical and poor. He doubted the value of any education for Jewish children that did not include Hebrew language and deny them knowledge of the beautiful and heroic history of the Jewish people. The future and the survival of the Jewish people depend on educating the children to love and to cherish Judaism. Otherwise, assimilation was unavoidable. Yet, Thon argued, to make the younger generation love Judaism, one should make it attractive. It could not be too conservative or isolated from the external, very tempting world. Judaism should be regenerated with the national element and the European culture. Synthesis of cultures is the core of Judaism. Thon had enough examples for Jewish history, for example, the interweaving of Jewish and Hellenistic culture in the philosophy of Philo of Alexandria, or Jewish and Muslim culture in the philosophy of Maimonides, or modern Hebrew literature with which combines Judaism with European modernism, also philosophy, for example, of Hermann Cohen and Kantian thinking, or philosophy of Abraham Joshua Heschel and existentialism. I think in a way it happens also in America today, creating Judaism in the light with the dominant culture, but perhaps it's a bit different because the state is an immigrant country, a country of immigrants. But this is a point for discussion. So Judaism from its very beginning entered into symbiotic relationship with the dominant culture. That was Thon's idea. Thon was not afraid of pathos and ornamented words, especially in his homilies, in which he believed should serve to encourage and console. Being a preacher was similar to being an actor in the theater. Drama needed pathos, which was powerful, but did not disturb the audience. Thon needed pathos, especially when he spoke against anti-Semitism, the pogroms in Russia, and later against the discriminatory laws of the Polish government against the Jews. So though he was optimistic in his mind, he was not closing his eyes to the realistic surroundings of the political situation in Poland. Nevertheless, Thon was optimistic about the future of Polish Jewry. This is actually, I would say, it turned my heart when I'm saying it, that he saw that the Polish Jewry has such a huge future in front of it. He was convinced that one of the main spiritual centers of Judaism would arise in Poland. The United States was the second place. His vision for the Jews in Poland was that they were at the same time equal and different. Jews deserve equal civil rights, but also cultural and national autonomy. He believes that the majority of Polish Jews, with the exception of the few who immigrated to Palestine, will continue to live in Poland and create a special synthesis of the two cultures. His proposal to be both a national Jew and a Polish patriot should be seen as an authentic and original contribution to national thought. And I will stop now because I think I used my time. So thank you.
Shoshana, thank you very much, Professor Ronen. This is a very important first opportunity to learn about Rabbi Thon. I know that we will now turn to questions, but I also want to tell you that we will also be calling on you to tell us more. Your book on Thon and the subsequent writings tell us that there's volumes and volumes of interactions with Rabbi Thon and his interlocutors that you have yet to tell us about. So first of all, let's turn to questions. I think you can see some of the questions in chat. There's a number of questions that are coming in also in Q&A. So we'll start. I think, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Dominika to put forward the question that came in Polish by Professor Arek Patalon. I don't know if you could see the question in Polish, Shoshana?
So I will read the question. I will now switch to Polish channel to read it, and you will hear a translation. So, okay. Pytanie od
This is a question from Dr. Mirosław
Patalon.
Patalon. My question relates to Słupsk, a city in which I live. Right before the Second World War, this is a German stolp. Between 1902 and 1936, the rabbi of the Jewish Reform community was Max Joseph, a unique rabbi because, as one of very few, was also a Zionist, and so was Ozjasz Thon. I was quite interested to hear that Ozjasz Thon received his doctorate in philosophy in Berlin in 1895, and at the same time, 2 years later, Max Thon received his doctorate in the same University of Berlin. They must have known one another because doctorates in philosophy were not a massive option. Yet these two were Reform and Zionists. Have you ever encountered any information about cooperation between them, knowledge of one another? I would only add that Thon was born in 1870, while Joseph Marx in 1868. Thank you.
Well, I'm so sorry, but in all my research, well, I must be frank, because my research was really published 8 years ago. So it means that about 10 years ago, perhaps I encountered this name, but I don't remember it. But in any way, what I would like maybe to say that this is a very common biography of many Jews from East Europe that lived to Berlin, sometimes to other places in Germany, like Breslau, now Wrocław in Poland, and to get an education, to get a modern education that they couldn't get in their places. So, and it kept on for other reasons also in the time between the two world wars. But I encountered with other names of people who became rabbis, like Marcus Broda or Marcus Ehrenpreis, also his friends that he was studying with them in Berlin, that came from Lemberg, Lviv, from East Europe, and they found others also. They were called Poles in the Jewish community there, and there was also the Russians. So Eastern European Jews that really were fascinated also from the modern world, that they could study the culture and the way of thinking of the modern world that was Germany then. So it's a kind of typical biography, but I'm sorry, I can't say anything about Max, what's his name? Max Joseph, sorry.
I think it's fortuitous. You'll have an opportunity to connect with Arek Patalon. We'll put you together to learn about each other. Max Joseph's work was translated from German into Hebrew 5 years ago. It was one of the projects that Friends of Jewish Renewal in Poland and Beit Polska facilitated. And so we're very happy to make a shidduch with your Rabbi Thon. We have a question regarding Rabbi Thon's attitude toward women. And we have an opportunity to actually have the people who ask these questions ask them directly. So I'm hoping that Paul Lips is still online, and I'm going to put him online and let him ask his question directly to you.
I know Thon had a very interesting concept of women. For example, that women would be separate from men, but they would be on the upper level of the synagogue. But I haven't found any broader information in terms of how he looked at women, of Jewish women, in terms of what would their place be within the more intellectual Jewish community.
Yes, thank you for this question, because this is, I think, one of the painful points in Thon for me, privately, let's say, because I think that concerning women, he was very traditionalist. He was not a feminist for sure, because whenever he turned to women in his sermons, he usually turned to them as mothers that should educate their children. He gave them much more place of educators than intellectual and public figures. Also, I can tell you, he had a son and a daughter, and although his daughter was really remarkably talented, he never thought of telling her that she can be a rabbi. And he actually sent her to a very good school in Krakow, but school of nuns, rabbi. So this was the best school for her to receive European education, but not Jewish. So
was that the norm of society? Are we talking about someone who fits well into the time period that we're talking about? Or were there other Jewish leaders in Krakow who might have had different approaches to women?
Shoshana, I don't know if you
yeah, I heard the question. I can't answer it in detail because I never worked on it and I never searched this question. What can I say that from knowing that if Sarah Schneider, the one who established Bet Yaakov, was considered to be a great feminist, so it's a completely different way of looking at women in our days. And I think that concerning the Jewish community, the Jewish religious community, no matter if it's progressive or orthodoxy or women were treated traditionally. If I can think of important women figures or essentials, so usually they are in the socialist party. It means far away from religion. Not that they were not Jews, but not religious Jews.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. We're going to turn to a question that is asked by David Cater. I'll read it out in English. What was Thon's relationship to the early, the telling of Rabbi Thon is totally new to me, so pardon the doubt, no doubt, the simple question that I will ask. Namely, am I correct in understanding that his Zionism had little to nothing to do with discrimination or anti-Semitism or even oppression, which played such a significant part of early Zionism? I'm thinking of Herzl, for example, the Dreyfus Affair, etc., but rather anchored in the earliest story of the Jewish people. If I am correct, did he have any followers going to Palestine, for example? I'm sure you have a response to that.
Thank you for this question. Yes, his Zionism was completely detached from anti-Semitism. It was not at all some kind of reaction to anti-Semitism in Europe or in Poland. and he was emphasizing that deliberately, that Zionism is like the new. He was actually under the influence of European nationalism, this 1848, let's say, the idea of nationalist states and so on. And he was thinking what can be the new direction of Judaism to develop into. And because he saw that the secularism is getting stronger, so what can unite the Jews? Not the religious element, but the national element, because we know that in Judaism it's kind of mixed, and no one can really tell how much of it is religion, how much of it is nationality, and what does it mean, this nationality at all. So it is a complex question, but the new wave of modern Judaism for him was Zionism as a new path of Judaism, or returning to the roots, as they thought, to the mythological ancient Hebrews. But it was not, and he was stressing, it was not consequences of anti-Semitism, because it was a consequence of its own development from inside. So, and he was not pleased to hear that Zionism a kind of reaction to anti-Semitism. He became Zionist very early, and he was adolescent when he became Zionist, when he became active Zionist. And I think this was the way for him to find a new path to Judaism. In a way, he was a disciple of Ahad Ha'am, if you know who he is. That Zionist, but from Zionist as not political, but social, but Zionism as a cultural, spiritual movement.
Thank you for this answer. We are also having a question from Brian Zachem. Actually, there are two questions from him. First of them is, what percentage of all Polish Jews were affiliated or identified with Reform Judaism? And the second question following this one is, who attempted to interact with the active different streams of Judaism in various areas of conflict?
Please, the second question again?
First one or second one?
The second.
The second, who attempted to interact with the active different streams of Judaism in various areas of conflict? Okay. Maybe, would you like to ask Brian to specify the question?
Yeah, very much.
Okay, so I will allow Brian to ask the question. Just give me a moment. Brian, if you are with us, we would love to hear a bit more from you about what you had in mind.
Thank you very much. What I meant by my second question is, did our progressive rabbi in this lecture, was he active in the variety of streams from the various Orthodox variations and other streams of Judaism such as existed? And I'm not familiar that much of the other streams. And I don't know how diverse as we find in the US, but I can only imagine in that period with folks in the big cities, in urban environments, as you mentioned, Krakow, etc., that there would be variations of what progressive Judaism was being expressed in from its roots in Germany. So my thought is, whom in that community tried to diplomatically keep discussion so that the community, as diverse and disparate as it was, had a kind of unity when they did have to represent themselves in the parliament or other regions, like under the Council of Four Lands. in the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Now I understand, I hope. Well, for the first question, I have no idea about the percentage, but I think it's not much. It usually was, as I said, in big cities like Krakow and Warsaw, among the intelligentsia that already went through a kind of acculturation. They needed the sermons be in Polish. So they actually didn't know Hebrew, which was really a painful point for Thon. So I don't think it was a huge percentage. I can't say if most of the Jews were living in the countryside, but if there were about 3 million of Jews in Poland, and the biggest city was Warsaw with 300,000, so most of the Jews were living in the countryside, and I don't think they were aware to Progressive Judaism, because Progressive Judaism is connected to Western ideas, modernization, and education, higher education. So it's not the Judaism that was that Jews were familiar with in shtetls. Usually only those who went to the West to study came across it. And as for the second question, Thon at the beginning was not regarded very highly by the Orthodox groups or Orthodox community in Krakow. But because of his unique personality, and because he was a person of compromise and understanding in getting into agreement, all his political, religious also in Krakow, also his political, I mean, whole Jewish, Poland, activity was to unite the Jews and to, and although he was a representative of Zionist party in the parliament, but in the parliament, other Jewish parties like Aguda, I mean, the party of the Orthodox, and also might be also the Bund, or kind of socialist Jews, and he wanted them all the time to. That's why he was the president of the Jewish circle in the parliament, because he thought that they have to build mutual strategy to fight for the whole Polish Jews. Also, because of his background and because his great knowledge in text, that was so much important for him. He tried to tell it to his flock that was actually much more acculturated than him, maybe assimilated than him. That you have to know the roots, you have to know Hebrew, you have to know the Jewish canon, and only then go further with it. You can't create something new if you don't have the tools of the past. So in all his political activity, he was trying to make all the Jewish groups together to fight for, of course, their human rights, the civil rights, but also what he never achieved, that Jews will have a national autonomy in Poland.
Thank you very much.
And maybe this is an anecdote, but when he died, almost all the Jews of Krakow and a lot of people from the Orthodox community just joined the funeral.
Professor Ronen, I'm going to ask one more question. There are many other questions that are being asked, but our time is almost over. I want to invite Alan Isser to ask his question. His question was Thon aware of the ideas of modern Orthodox thinkers like Samson Raphael Hirsch?
Yes, of course. And he was when he criticize Orthodoxy as a kind of rejection or reaction to Reform Judaism, he was meant this new Orthodox, not the Hasidism of Poland. Yes, so of course he knew the ideas and he was not accepting them. He criticized both because he wanted to find a place between them, Orthodoxy and Reform, but he was for sure not adherent of even what is called modern Orthodox, because he really thought of synthesis with European culture, and in Poland was something that I didn't mention. He helped the Jews, 3 million of Jews in Poland. It's a great community. He really hoped they will create Jewish culture in Polish. I think his idea to Polish Jews was a kind of what is going on with Jews in the United States. In the United States, they create Jewish culture in English today. This was his idea. Of course, nowadays it's impossible. There are no Jews in Poland, or very few Jews in Poland. No one to create a Jewish culture in Polish, but this was his idea.
I want to thank you, Professor Ronen. We have just scratched the surface. I had the privilege of reading the book, A Prophet of Consolation, on the Threshold of Destruction. It is a little hard to get this book, but it's available. And I think we need to get the publishers to make it more available. It is a fascinating book. It answers in greater depth than is possible now the questions you ask, and draws an incredible picture of this Renaissance teacher. I have written in our publicity that Thon is the equivalent and almost contemporary of Stephen S. Wise and Leo Beck, but more so because of his complex involvements. And Shoshana Ronen has done the Jewish people a great service by recovering the story of his life, and she's continuing to write about him and many, many other topics. And we demand a return visit to our freighted legacies soon. We hope that we'll have many other opportunities to learn from you. I want to turn to just a bit of the business that we have at hand in terms of the future of our freighted legacies. First of all, our community has been very concerned about the hostages. One of the hostages is especially one of our own, Alex Danzig. And I have put in chat the link to the petition to the Polish government asking that they make an effort to intervene on behalf of Alex Danzig, who sits at the desk of Polish concerns at Yad Vashem and is a sometimes presence in our Beit Polska congregation, and we have mobilized in Warsaw, and I hope that people will take that link and use it to contact the Polish government and to be aware and concerned for Alex Danzig's welfare. I want to announce that our next speaker will be the person who is currently going to be in Washington, D.C., Joanna Tokarska-Bakir, whose book, Cursed, A Social Portrait of the Kielce Pogrom, has just been translated to English. I'm proud to say that Friends of Jewish Renewal was active in helping that book to come to its English translation. And her interlocutor will be Jan Gross, author of Neighbors. This program will be conducted, except for the introduction by yours truly, will be conducted in Polish, and we will listen to the English. Many of us who are listening in English will listen to the Polish transcription. So we invite people to continue to be involved with these programs, to be on our mailing list. And we have a number of additional programs. We conclude today with a reminder about the petition for Alex's welfare, and heartfelt thanks to Shoshana Ronen, and wish everyone a good evening and a good day. Shalom.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Shalom.
you.